Not easy to watch, but I thought that would be the best way to begin our presentation tonight so everyone is under no misapprehension and no confusion about exactly the evil that we face. If you haven't seen the Center for Medical Progress's undercover videos, there have been a series so far of 10, and that's a nice summation of exactly what we, the church, are up against. My name is Rebekah Maxwell, and I work with Personhood, Iowa, just to try and help inform and really activate the church. That is our focus. You'll hear a lot about that tonight. But we need to start with a little background, because I think these videos are so disturbing to people because Planned Parenthood has been a part of our neighborhoods and our communities longer than I've been alive, for over almost 100 years now. And people are shocked to discover what Planned Parenthood really does for a living. They've been very good at politicizing and with PR to make people think that what they provide is women's health care. But in actuality, what they provide is death on demand. It is a blood industry. And that's a controversial statement to make unless you actually look at what they do. And something that I'd like to impart tonight, and I'm going to do kind of a shortened version of this presentation so we can get to the main attractions tonight. But I'd like everyone to be well aware that this is not something that has just happened, that, you know, maybe a few bad eggs hopped in somehow to Planned Parenthood's executive positions in 2015. This is something that has been going on from the beginning of its industry, because it was the goal, the glory, really, of Planned Parenthood's founder, the most influential woman probably of the last century, and her name was Margaret Sanger. She grew up in a large family. She was born in 1879, and she lived in New York City. Her mother died very young. So that was her idea, was that a lot of the poorer women that she came into contact with were burdened by children, by too many children. And her solution became, well, we need to eliminate the children from that equation so that women can, realize their full potential because we're being burdened by children. Margaret Sanger believed in the worldview on the right. This is very important because essentially the question that we're discussing tonight, I think, begins on a foundation of worldviews. There's the Genesis view, which I hold, and that I trust everyone in this building holds tonight, or at least the vast majority of us. And that is what we reveal or what has been revealed in Genesis chapter 1, that humans are special among all other living things, that we're created in the image of God, and that every person has value, that we deserve to be respected and protected because of that, and we are all created. Every one of us, whatever we look like, what our sex, our creed, at any stage of development, we are all created with an equal right to life. The eugenicist view was the prevailing view at Margaret Sanger's time among intellectuals. It was really a product of Darwinian evolution. Darwin's cousin looked at biology and said, okay, well, if we just think that this is what animals do, that they continue to evolve, that they breed and then they kill each other off, it's a very natural selection mindset. Well, humans are just animals, so that's what we should do with human beings. That we're just a random combination of genetic mutation, and that since our worth is not inherent, because God didn't make us, we don't have a soul, it doesn't matter, we're just dust, any person found burdensome on the collective does not have a right to life, and that some lives are inherently and necessarily worth less than others. I hold the first view, that every single one of you sitting here tonight, your best friend and your worst enemy, we all have the equal right to life. Margaret Sanger held the second, and she believed that it was really her mission to cull humanity, the human herd, of the undesirables and the unfit. These are some of her actual words. She was a proud eugenicist. Planned Parenthood's not proud of her today, and they will debate over whether or not I should even be allowed to share her own words with you. But she was very proud of this, and she published, openly and proudly in public, in her magazine called Birth Control Review, and whose tagline was "To create a race of thoroughbreds," talking about human beings. These are some of the things she said. Like the advocates of birth control, the eugenicists, for instance, are seeking to assist the race toward the elimination of the unfit. Birth control is the greatest and most truly eugenic method. It has been seen by the clearest and most forward-thinking eugenicist as the most constructive and necessary means of racial health. It shows us that we're paying for and submitting to an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who should never have been born at all. That our wealth is being diverted from the progress of human civilization, and our eyes should be opened to the terrific cost to the community of this dead weight of human waste. This is the founder of Planned Parenthood that is in our communities, on our streets, that receives your money. This is where it all began. Going on, she fought to limit the fertility, sometimes forcibly and by law, the mentally and physically defective, possibly drastic and Spartan methods may be forced upon American society if it chooses to encourage the chance and chaotic breeding that results from our stupid sentimentalism. Again, this was not her view alone. This was the prevailing wisdom of the elite, the intelligent, the ruling class of the day. Is it any surprise that those who thought themselves already a little better than their fellow man would then decide, well, we just need to eliminate all of those below us? This was the prevailing wisdom. It also helped birth, and from that philosophy, some of the most heinous and violent acts of genocide that the world has ever seen. These same eugenicists that wrote for Sanger, that supported her, that helped her find her first headquarters, were the ones that inspired some of the ethnic cleansings that would later occur in the 30s in Nazi Germany. This is the same group of people, and it is the same philosophy. And again, I remind us that we support this with our money. This is where it began. She said knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. Its general and prudent practice must lead ultimately to a cleaner race. Again, she was very proud of this. She thought of human beings as mere animals, and that it was her job, or our job perhaps, to purify the humanity of the unfit mentally and physically. In George Grant's biography called Killer Angel, he wrote, as long as blacks and Hispanics demonstrate good quality gene pools, as long as they act white and think white, that's a quote, they are esteemed equally with Aryans. As long as they are, as Sanger said, the best of their race, they can be counted as valuable citizens. By the same token, individual whites who show dysgenic traits, it's a word she uses often, must also have their fertility, quote, curbed, right along with other inferiors and undesirables. This was no secret. She was not ashamed. She proclaimed this openly, that she thought white people were better than everybody else, and that everybody else basically needed to be bred out of humanity, out of existence. And she took it out on the most innocent and the smallest among us, the most vulnerable. In fact, her first clinic, which was called the American Birth Control League, was begun in Harlem in 1929, specifically for an experimental clinic for the benefit of the colored people. In 1939, she wrote a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble of Procter & Gamble, and she was discussing her plans for the so-called Negro Project. And this is what she said. We should hire 3 or 4 black ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and engaging personalities. The most successful approach to their population is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it should occur to their more rebellious members. And this is the philosophy that she took to some of the most influential black ministers, leaders, professors of the day. And they believed that she was doing this for the benefit of their communities, many of whom were hit the hardest with poverty, illiteracy, out-of-wedlock births. She presented it as a benefit to the poor people, to the downtrodden. But in actuality, her goal was to breed a race of human thoroughbreds. She called the poor, minority, and immigrant populations in her writing human weeds, reckless breeders, spawning human beings who should never have been born. She also wasn't a big fan of charity. She liked to use the government as much as she could to get her way and to enforce her way. And she thought that organized charities, private charities of the church, and general benevolent societies really stood in her way. She thought, in fact, that it encouraged the low elements, the unfit elements of the population, the defectives, delinquents, and dependents, as she said. So what's the solution? It now remains for the U.S. government to set a sensible example to the world by offering a bonus or yearly pension to all obviously unfit parents who allow themselves to be sterilized by harmless and scientific means. In this way, the moron and the diseased would have no posterity to inherit their unhappy condition. The number of the feeble-minded would decrease and a heavy burden would be lifted from the shoulders of the fit. Because again, you don't have rights as an individual. You don't have a soul, and we weren't created in the image of God, so why not? She fought for actual birth control bureaus in which men and women will be taught the science of parenthood and breeding to breed out of the race the scourges of transmissible disease, mental defect, poverty, lawlessness, and crime, since these classes would be decreasing in number instead of breeding like weeds. And from this philosophy, Planned Parenthood's clinics were born. Now, one fascinating thing that you might not actually know about Margaret Sanger is that all of this ugliness that came straight from her heart, and I say straight from hell, in spite of all of that, she still had a bit of a pang of conscience when it came to abortion. Why? Well, in her words, while there are cases where the law recognizes an abortion as justifiable, I assert that the hundreds of thousands of abortions performed each year are a disgrace to civilization. In 1916, when she was speaking to a women's rally of the KKK, by the way, we explained what contraception was, that abortion was the wrong way. No matter how early it was performed, it was taking life. That contraception was the better way because life had not yet begun. Margaret Sanger wrote that in her biography. Because even she, who says some of the most heinous things I have ever had the displeasure of reading and knowing were true, like one of her more infamous quotes, the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. Even she had a pang of conscience when it came to abortion because she knew that it was life. Unfortunately, this is not just a history lesson. We live this in America today. We live with the influence of this awful, darkened woman's perspective because we continue to fund this killing. Ryan Bomberger of the Radiance Project says the intent of Sanger's Negro Project is still firmly intact. Between 70 and 80% of Planned Parenthood's facilities are located in low-income, high-minority communities. Nearly 40% of all African-American pregnancies end in induced abortion. There is more access to birth control than ever before, and the huge disparity in poverty rates between whites and blacks continues. Fatherlessness and poverty are rampant. Unintended pregnancy rates continue to rise. Today, the same mouthpieces for Planned Parenthood are claiming lack of access, while black women access abortion clinics at 5 times the rate of white women, and this is by design. Abortion kills more black Americans than all other causes of death combined. And in New York City, which is the original home of Planned Parenthood, more black babies are aborted than born alive. That's what Planned Parenthood was about from the beginning. And this is what we are here in a huge way to stop. I'm so glad that you're here tonight. I understand that this is a bit of a difficult pill to swallow right as you get in the door. We're going to have some encouragement along the way, but my goal tonight has been to wake you up and to let you know by pure information exactly what it is we're up against. This is the face of evil, and it is lying and deceiving our men and women. It is stealing the lives of our children, and it is by our consent. We believe at Personhood, Iowa, that motivating the church to stand up, to speak out and say no more, we will protect the most vulnerable among us. We will not allow our women, our children, and our young men to be exploited and told that it is okay when there's a problem, an unforeseen situation, in any situation, that it's okay to kill an innocent preborn child. Because they're people too. That's the mission of Personhood, Iowa, is for us to recognize the dignity and the sacredness of every God-given life. Thank you.